Hey,
Hi,
how
teacher.
you
How are
doing?
you? I'm good. How about you?
Good.
Yeah.
No worries. Is everyone
Yeah.
staying healthy in your home?
Yes, I stay home. So
Good.
always stay home. I don't know when I go to work, but now I stay home.
Be a while. Yeah. I'm glad you're here with me today. The goal in this lesson is to just review adding fractions with improper unknown denominators and adding and subtracting mixed numbers that have uncommon denominators and regrouping them. So I've got a couple examples of this. Do you have like a pad of paper and something to write with? You all ready?
Yes, I'm all right.
Great. I want to start with just some fractions that have different denominators. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so in this first example, you see you have 4 here and 6, and both of those numbers have multiples that are common. You want to find the lowest common multiple before you start. So when I look at 4 or 6, I'm thinking, what are all the numbers that you can multiply 4 and 6 by until you find a multiple that's the same? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get my pen to work. Here we go. So over here, if I take 4 and I take 4 times 2, my first multiple is 8. And if I take 16 times 2, my first multiple is 32. And I don't have a match yet. If I do 4 times 3, I get 12. If I did 16 times 3, I would get, let's see here, 30, 48. And then if I do 4 times 4, I'd get 16, and I have a 16 here. So this is how you find the lowest common multiple. You want to have common denominators. So if I did both of these, so both fractions have a 16 on the bottom, when you find a common denominator, then you're ready to add. But if you're adding and subtracting fractions and the denominator isn't the same, you can't go on. You have to find a common denominator first. So if I did 4 times 4 on the bottom, you have to do the same thing on the top, so both fractions are equivalent. So 4 times 3 is 12. Now the multiple for 16, which is 16, is just 16 times 1. So if I did that down here, then you multiply the top times 1 up here. Now, if both denominators are common, now you're ready to add the numerators. So if I did 12 plus 1, I would get 13. And then the bottom stays 16. And so that would be
The answer?
the answer for number 1. Yeah. Hey, welcome. How you doing? Okay, let's look at the next one. We've got 5 and 10. And between these two, they're both uncommon denominators. So I want to find the lowest common multiple. So if I had 5 and I know 2 times 5 is 10, and so that's the first matching multiple. So I'm going to change both of these to a 10. Now, if you already have a 10 on the bottom over here, you're not going to change it. It'd be like 1 times 10 and 1 times 1. But over here, if you have to multiply this times 2, then you have to do the same thing at the top to make it equal. So 2 times 2 is 4. Now, when your denominators are the same, only add the top. So 4 plus 1 is 5, and the bottom stays 10. Now, if you remember, you can't leave a fraction if it's not simplified. So if the numerator is a factor of the denominator, then you have to reduce it. So here, 5 divided by 5 would be 1, and 10 divided by 5 would be 2. You'd want to reduce it to 1/2. That's your answer for number 2. So look at number 9 here. You have 4 and 2. What's the common multiple for this? What do you think? We're going to choose 4. Because I know 4 times 1 is 4 and 1 times 1 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And if I did that down here, I have to do it on the top. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I'm ready to add. So 1 plus 2 is 3, and the bottom stays 4. And this is already simplified. You can't do anything with that because 3 is not a factor of 4. Let me see if I can scroll down a little bit. This one's a little bit bigger. I have 14 and 3. Now the shortcut for lowest common multiple is if 3 is prime and it's not a factor of 14, you can just multiply these two. Or you can multiply it out like this. And you can do 14 times 2 is 28. And 3 times 2 is 6. And you can see 3 doesn't go into 28. So 14 times 3 is going to be 42. And of course, 3 times 3 is 9. But I'm going to multiply this out until I get to 3 times 14 is 42. Because 3 doesn't go into 14, it doesn't go into 28, so I'm going to stick with 42. So that's kind of a shortcut if you don't want to like multiply it out 3 times 14 all the way out. So 14 becomes 42, and 3 becomes 42. And then to make these fractions equivalent, whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So if I multiply this times 3, I have to multiply this times 3. So this becomes 9. I multiplied this by 14. So I have to multiply the top by 14. So 14 times 1 is 14. Now I'm ready to add. So 9 plus 14 is going to equal 23 over 42. And then that is simplified because 23 doesn't go into 42 and it's already prime. So that's as far as you have to take that question. Okay, let's look at number 6. I have 19 and 2. 2 is prime and it's not a factor of 19. So the shortcut is just to multiply these by each other. So if I did 2 times 19, I would get 38. So I'm going to write 38 here and 38 over here. And then I have to make these fractions equivalent. So 2 times 19 is 38. So 2 times 1 is just 2. And then 2 times 19 is 38. So if I do that to the top, 1 times 19 is just 19. Okay, and then you're ready to add. So I have 2 plus 19 is going to be 21 over 38. Yeah. Now let's look at the factors of 21. I have 3, 7, 21, and 1. 3 doesn't go into 38 evenly. 7 doesn't go into 38 evenly. So this is simplified. That's as far as you need to go. Okay? All right, let's look at 2 and 16. 2 is prime, but it is a factor of 16. So this is where you just choose the larger number. So if 2 fits into 16, then that's the denominator. So I'm going to put a 16 on the bottom here. Then over here, I'm just going to leave this one the same. So 2 times 8 is 16, so I have to do the same thing up here to make sure it's equivalent. And this becomes 8 over 16. So just like 1/2 is 50 cents, 8 over 16 is 50 cents because 8 is half of 16. So make sure as you're doing this that your fractions are equivalent and that they make sense as you're making them equivalent. And so this stays 3. Okay, now that the denominator is the same, you can add the numerator. So 8 plus 3 becomes 11. And the bottom stays 16. And 11 is prime, and it's not a factor of 16. That's how you know that this is simplified. Okay? Now this next one is really easy because you already have the same denominators. You have an 11 here and an 11 here. So in a case like that, just add the numerators. 9 plus 1 is 10. And the bottom stays 11.
Oh.
This one's not as easy. This one's a little harder. 3 is prime and it's not a factor of 19. So this is when you multiply by each other. 3 times 19 is going to be 57. So for this one, you have to change both of them. So if I multiply this by 3, then to make it equivalent, I have to multiply the top by 3. So 3 times 6 is 18. If I multiply this times 19, I have to multiply the top by 19. So up here, 2 times 19 is going to be 38. Okay, now the bottom's the same. I'm ready to add the top. So 18 plus 38 is going to be 56. And then the bottom stays the same, 57.
7.
Okay, and 56 is not prime, but it's not a factor of 57. If I looked at the factors of 56, I'd have 7 and 8. Of course, I would have 19. I would have 19 and 2 would be 38. But there's nothing that will simplify this except 1. So you're just going to leave it exactly the way it is. So 2 and 11. This one is the shortcut where you've got a prime number, 2. It's not a factor of 11, so you just multiply these by each other. So 2 times 11, we know that's 22. I'm going to change both of these. If I multiply this by 2, multiply the top by 2. If I multiply this by 11, multiply the top by 11. So now I have 15 over 22. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. Okay, between 3 and 17, 3 is not a factor of 17 and it's prime. So again, I'm going to multiply these by each other. And that would equal 3 times 17 is going to equal 51. So if I multiply this by 17, I'm going to do the same thing to the top. If I multiply this by 3, make sure you do the same thing to the top. And then you're ready to add. 17 plus 6 is 23. And the bottom's 51. And that's simplified. Over here, you've got 6 and 3. So 6 goes into, or 3 goes into 6. So 6 is going to be your denominator. So I'm just going to change this one, and this one stays the same. So if I multiply 3 times 2, I have to do the same thing up here. So 2 times 1 is 2. Now I'm ready to add. But I can't leave it like this. You have to simplify it. So I know 3 goes into 6 twice. So if I divide the top by 3, that equals 1. If I divide the bottom by 3, that's going to equal 2. So just as 3 is half of 6, you want to write it that way. 1 over 2, 1/2. Okay, number 12 is another one where lowest common multiple is a shortcut. 8 is not prime, but it's not a factor of 11. So I'm going to do 8 times 11 and get 88. Okay, and then what you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So 8 times 4 is going to be 32. If I multiply this by 11, I have to do 3 times 11 is 33. And if I add these, I'm going to get 65 over 88. Now I know my factors of 65 are going to be 5, and 5 is not a factor of 88, so this is simplified. Okay, now just like you have to find common denominators when you're adding fractions, you have to find common denominators when you're adding mixed numbers. And some of these become kind of tricky, so I want to look at a few with you today. So when you're looking at mixed numbers, I want you to think of money, okay? So I want you to think 1 1/5 is like $1.20. And 2 7/10 is like $2.70. But if I just want to add these, I still have to change the denominators. So between 5 and 10, I'm going to choose 10 as my lowest common multiple. Let's look at the 10. 10 is what we want to save. So if I multiply this 5 times 2, then I'm going to have to do the same thing to the top. So now it becomes 1 and 2/10 plus 2 and 7/10. So $1 plus $2, that's like 3. And 2 plus 7 is going to be 9/10. That's going to be like $3.90. Okay? Or you can use 3 and 9/10. That's fine. Okay, let's look at this next one. We have 2 and 1, and I have 8 and 4. So between 4 and 8, I'm going to want to choose 8 to be my lowest common multiple, my common denominator. So if I multiply 4 times 2 to make it into an 8, I want to do that to the top. So this would become 1 and 2/8. And this is going to stay the same because it already has an 8. So this is 2 and 1/8. So now when I add these, 2 plus 1 is 3. 1 plus 2 is 3/8. That's a 3. 3 and 3/8. Okay. So here I've got 3 and 2. 2 is prime, and it's not a factor of 3, so I'm just going to do 3 times 2 to get a common denominator. So 3 times 2 is 6. If I multiply this times 2, then I have to multiply the top times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. So if I multiply 2 times 3 here, I get 6. But then I have to do the same thing to the 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Now I'm ready to add. 5 plus 2 is 7. 4 plus 3 is 7/6. But you see how 7 is more than 6? It's an improper fraction. So I have to change 7 and 6. This is the way you do that. 6 goes into 7 one whole time. 1 times 6 is 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. The remainder is the numerator. So this equals 1 and 1/6. So I'm going to take that 1, I'm going to add it to my 7, and it becomes 8. And whatever's left over, 1/6. And that's called regrouping. So if you have a fraction next to a whole number and the fraction's improper, you have to take that fraction and you have to divide it out. And you have to make sure that you take that whole number and add it to your existing whole number to make it an 8. Okay, let's go down and look at number 5 over here because we got a little bit of space. I have a 6 and a 3. I know 3 is a prime number and it's a factor of 6. So if it's a factor of 6, then I want to keep 6. That's going to be your common denominator. And I'm just going to change the 3. So 3 times 2 is 6. And 1 times 2 is 2. So now I have 1 and 2/6 plus 3 and 5/6. I know 1 plus 3 is 4. 2 plus 5 is 7. And the denominator is 6. So my problem here is, again, 7 is greater than 6. So this, again, is an improper fraction. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to divide 6 into 7. 6 goes into 7 one whole time, and there's 1 left over. So that means 1 and 1/6. And I have to take this, and I have to add it to my answer here. So 1 plus 4 is 5. And what's left over is 1/6. This becomes 5 and 1/6. Let's look at number 6. I have 10 and 20. The denominators are uncommon. 10 is a factor of 20, so I'm going to use 20 as my lowest common multiple. That means I only change this fraction. So 2 times 10 is going to be 20, right?
Yeah.
2 times 1 is just 2. So now I've got 5 and 2/20 plus 4 and 7/20. So 5 plus 4 is going to be 9. 2 plus 7 is 9. And the bottom stays 20. I don't have to regroup this because 9/20, that's less than 50 cents. That's not more than $1. So there's nothing to add to the 9, and I'm not dividing this fraction because it's not improper. So that's your answer for number 6. That one's not so bad. Okay, for number 7, I have 8 and 4 for denominators. 4 is a factor of 8, so that's going to be my lowest common multiple. That's the one I want to keep. So to make 4 into an 8, I'm going to multiply it times 2, and I'm going to do the same thing to the top to make it equivalent. So this becomes 6 and 6/8. And this fraction here, this mixed number doesn't change. Plus 2 and 3/8. So 6 plus 2 is 8. 6 plus 3 is 9. And the denominator stays the same. Now I can't leave it this way because again, 9 is higher than 8. This is more than $1. So I have to divide out this fraction. So I'm going to see how many times does 8 go into 9? Well, it goes into it once. 1 times 8 is 8. And I subtract and there's 1 left over. So that means it's 1 and 1/8. And I'm going to add that to my 8. So 8 plus this 1 is going to equal 9. And whatever's left over, this part right here, it goes up here. So I have 9 and 1/8 is equivalent to 8 and 9/8. Okay? Now, in the same sense, when you subtract mixed numbers, if there's something left over or if you have to borrow, you have to regroup whatever you borrowed. And this is, I think, subtracting fractions is a little bit more tricky. Let's take a look at this example here. You have $15.50 minus $9.75. So between 2 and 4, I want to choose 4 as my lowest common multiple. I want that to be my denominator. So if I multiply this times 2, I can get a 4. If I multiply this times 2, it's equivalent. So 2/4 is 50 cents, just like 1/2 is 50 cents. So I have 15 and 2/4, and I'm going to subtract 9 and 3/4. Now I'm going to look at that. Can I do that? Can I take 3 away from 2? I can't do that. So this is where you have to borrow. So I'm going to borrow from this 15, and it's going to equal 14. And I look at the denominator. The denominator is a 4, so I'm going to take the 1 I borrowed and write that 1 as 4/4. But then I have to add what was already there. There's a 2. There's already 50 cents. So I'm going to add the 50 cents to that 4. And now it's going to equal 14 and 6/4. So 14 and 6/4, this 6/4 is improper. I want you to see that that's the same amount of money as 15 and 1/2. So 15 and a half is $15.50. But here's the weird thing. So is 14 and 6/4. That's also $15.50. I'm just writing it this way so I can subtract 9 and 3/4. So now I'm ready to subtract 9 and 3/4. I can take 9 from 14 and I get 5. I can take 3 from 6 and I get 3. And the denominator stays the same. 5 and 3/4, or you could say $5.75. So that's called regrouping and subtraction. It takes a few extra steps, but conceptually, it makes sense. So I have 15 and 5. 5 is prime. 5 is a factor of 15. So 15 is my lowest common multiple. I want to keep that. So I'm just going to change this fraction here. So 5 times 3, that's 15. I'm going to do the same thing at the top to make it equivalent. 1 times 3 is 3. There's my 4 and 3/4. 4 and 3/15 is the same as 4 and 1/5. This is $4.20. This is $4.20. Now I'm going to rewrite the 10 because it's already got a 15 as a denominator. And now I'm ready to subtract, or am I? Can I take 3 away from 1? No, this is where you got to regroup. So I'm going to borrow from the 10. It becomes 9 and 15 over 15. I write the dollar as 15 over 15 because that's my lowest common multiple, 15. Now I remember, but there was a 1 there. I have to take that 1, I have to add it to the 15 because it was already there. So I have to add it there. So now it becomes 9 and 16 over 15. And then I'm going to see if I can subtract the 4 and the 3/15. So 9 minus 4 is going to be 5. 16 minus 3 is going to be 13. And the bottom stays 15. So this is going to be 5 and 13 over 15. Let's look at the next question here. I have 5 and 10. Now I'm looking at this. 5 is prime, and it's a factor of 10. I know 10 divided by 5 is 2. So that's why I keep 5 as my common denominator, or people call it the lowest common multiple between 5 and 10. So this is going to stay the same. I'm going to say 16 and a 10th.
16.
I'm going to change this to a 10 by multiplying it by 2. And I do the same thing to the top, thanks. Okay, so this becomes 7 and 2/10. Okay, and then you ask yourself, do I need to regroup this? Because I can see the 2 down here is higher than 1. I can't subtract 2 from 1. So this is where you borrow from the 16. It becomes 15. And I write the dollar that I borrowed according to the denominator. So if it's 10, then I write it as 10 over 10. Then I go back and I check what my numerator was. It was a 1. So I have to go back and I add the 1 to the 10 plus 1. So now it becomes 15 and 11 over 10 minus 7 and 2 over 10. So 15 minus 7 is going to equal 8. And 11 minus 2 is going to equal 9. And the bottom stays 15. And that's your answer for number, which is that? I can't even see which number that is. Let's do one more and I'll let you go, okay? I've got 2 and 3 over here. 2 is prime. It's not a factor of 3. So the shortcut is you multiply these by each other to find the lowest common multiple. And I know that's 6. So I'm going to change both of these fractions so there's a 6 on the bottom. So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. And you got a 15 over here, and you've got a 7 over here. Okay. And I ask myself, can I subtract those fractions? Can I take a 2 from a 3, 3 from a 2? I can't do that. So I have to borrow from the 15. It equals 14. And I look at my denominator, it's 6. So I'm going to write 6 over 6. And I look at what's already there. You got a 2. So I'm going to bring that and add it to my numerator. So now I've got 14 and 8 over 6 minus 7 and 3/6. Now that looks like something we can do. I can say 14 minus 7 is 7. That works. I can say 8 minus 3 is 5. That works. And the denominator stays the same. And I can see it's simplified because 5 is prime and it's not a factor of 6. That's as far as you have to take it. So good to have all of you here today. And I want you to know that all of these lessons are being videotaped. So I'm going to eventually have them uploaded on a YouTube channel. And I'll just say the title of whatever the lesson is. Like this one would be adding fractions with uncommon denominators, or regrouping mixed numbers with uncommon denominators. And that way, if you miss a class or if you want to go back and just review the worksheet, you can go back and check part of the video. And I'm going to have these uploaded. I think we've done about 4 lessons now using Zoom. And I'm going to start uploading those and then give you a link to the channel so you can go back and see yourself and look over what we've done. But any questions that you guys have on this lesson? You're doing okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay for now.
Okay. All right. Well, again, so good to see all of you. And I hope that you guys continue to do well and that you're safe. And I will be seeing you. Looks like someone just joined. Someone just joined. And I'll be seeing you next week. Remember, these lessons start at 5 and they just go from 5 to 5:30. And if you just joined us, you're just joining the tail end of our lesson today. 30 minutes, 5 to 5:30. Good to see all of you guys. See you on Monday, okay? Monday, 5 to 5:30. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, teacher.
Bye.
Stay safe.
You too.